Hello guys, welcome back. It's almost like we never left. Let's go back here, start sharing. There you go, right there. So yeah, I didn't do much from yesterday. Kind of like let it stay a little bit. I did a little bit of work on this area here, kind of like that pinch that I had in there, kind of like tweaked a little bit. And then the body itself, I started like removing that big lump in there, just like normalize her a little bit before I go crazy, because I want to make sure I'm actually focusing on the face first, and before I go too crazy with other stuff. So I was thinking about today doing some more of the same, basically. And I was like, we're gonna be sculpting much more around this area of the eyes, and then going through different shaders, not shaders, different brushes, and then yeah, just trying to get a little bit more of the organic feel to the whole thing. It's like there's lots of wrinkles I'm gonna have to add to her, and then during that process, I can just explain. It's like there's things we didn't talk about yesterday. For example, the inflate brush that I use to create a little bit more of an organic feel, but we have to be very careful with it. And then other things, it's like a bunch of little techniques I can show you guys, like mostly using like very similar brushes, but just using it in a different way. So let's focus on that. Like I'm looking at this lady here, and then she's a totally different person, different age and everything. But it's cool because it's a high resolution image, so I can get some clues about, the way that the skin breaks up around those areas. And it's kind of similar to what the other lady has. I like those little lines in here. In our case here with the other old lady, we got a bunch of those like really breaking up much more than what we have in there, which kind of reminds me of that guy that I sculpted, Roy. Like I even posted on my Instagram at some point that he has a similar kind of skin. Everything is very broken up like that. So yeah, I'm gonna be focusing on a little bit on that. And then obviously for your models, if you're sculpting someone younger, you're not gonna have access to all those bigger wrinkles and everything, but everything else in terms of like how to create more direction to the skin and everything is common. It's like it's something you can use. It's just like in her case here, probably like I said before, gonna have to start smoothing out a lot of those pores in there and give a little bit more room for this kind of detail. It's like a little bit more wrinkles and things like that. So I'm gonna go back around the eyes here. I'm gonna focus a little bit on that again. And then basically what I'm gonna be doing, again, I'm gonna be blocking things first. Not at the highest resolution, but like, or like a few resolutions down, maybe like 1 or 2. So at 2 million polygons around here. And then let's just get my carve brush. And let's do some of that. So I can start, like I said before, like adding more asymmetrical detail at this point, because I'm not gonna use a lot of like pores around this area here of the eyes, right? And then the ones I'm gonna be adding to this area, I can just like, carefully place them. So I'm more concerned about not disrupting the symmetry around the forehead at this point and the sides in here, because I still have to finish it up. Same for the sides. But then everything else around the eyes, I can actually break symmetry pretty good at this point. So let's start sketching some detail here. I'm going to start like with the lower intensity, because I just want to mark where things are. I'm going to get some of them coming from that direction around here, and then around there. So those are coming from the outside, and some of them are going to have more volume than the other ones. So like that, and then even here they start like going a little bit longer. And then here, I'm gonna carve. She has actually this whole bag here is a little bit higher, so I might want to do that now. So I'm just gonna mark this a little bit deeper, and then break it up around here. And again, I'm not at the highest resolution, so a lot of this stuff that I'm doing here, the pores are probably going to be very well preserved at the end of the day. So here, some of those guys are going to start maybe more towards the center. Maybe like a little deeper one around here. And even around the edge in here, you can start like breaking things a little bit. Look at that. We can move on to this area here. And normally what happens in here is that you start getting this line is going towards the eyebrows. So right around here, we're going to start like dragging from here all the way around up. Kind of like looking at my reference there. And then around here, gonna get like, she has a weird one that kind of goes to the side. And then it wraps around the pimple, not a pimple, but a mole that she has in there. Let me just do that. And then this is gonna become like a straighter line. It's gonna cut across. It's off center, it's not right in the center, so it's a little bit more like that. And then here, we're gonna incorporate some of those nice wrinkles that she has in there. So basically, from here, I'm gonna just cut this up, carve around there. Has a little bit of a sharper angle. And then this one here, I'm gonna make it sure that we have a little bit of a split around here, and then go back. And this is gonna create like a larger fold. So I'm gonna just keep going with it like that. And now we're gonna actually make this entire thing deeper. So I'm gonna go lower intensity and then a bigger brush. I'm gonna try to dig this just to get a little bit more of this soft feel to it. And then we can use the clay build up with a little round alpha to just start like building up this correlation between those forms pressing against each other. So just get that. And then around here, just add some more of that volume. This one actually goes and hides underneath. So I'm just gonna bring it up around here. I might actually have to recarve it to actually create this little hidden line, which actually in her case goes and hides behind it. So I'm gonna just carve in there and then reduce the depth around here. And let's smooth it out pretty good. There, and then let's recarve it. Like changes direction in there. All right, so let's go back in here, and then she has a third one. So basically we have that little line there, the second one, and then there's a third one that's a little bit more in the surface. So this one comes like in an angle like this, and then up again. Something like that. Let's just smooth it out. And then let's do it again with a little sharper and more intensity, so like 12. So at this point here, I can start actually digging this a little deeper, and we're gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna go bigger with the brush and then a smaller intensity. I'm gonna dig like a secondary, broader kind of detail in there, and then I'm gonna build up around it. Let's use the clay build up and add some meat in here around this whole area. And then drag it towards the eye. Always going this kind of like diagonal like that. Same with this guy. Around there, and then build this one up a little bit as well. Make sure it's very organic. Now, one thing that I use, after I add some of this this type of detail in here, I use a little bit of the inflate brush, but it's the kind of brush you have to be very careful with, because it makes things explode quite a bit if you don't do it correctly. So let's just finish this ones here first, and then we're gonna move on to that. When I look at the reference in there, I mean, like those lines in her eyes, they're not completely straight. So for example, like this one here, I can actually make a little bit more of a square. Just get a little bit more of a interesting shape to it instead of like just like completely round and perfect. This one here as well, I'm gonna just bring it down. I'm gonna actually inflate this area around it. Not inflate, but build up this area around to kind of like create a little bit of, you know, it's like it's actually this area and this area are at the same level. So like same height. And then in between you have this little valley in there. So I'm gonna do that and then build up a little bit of a bulge around here to create that impression that's very soft skin in there. And now I'm at the lowest resolution level for my HD. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna use some inflating here just to show you the difference. If I use like with intensity very high, even like 10 is basically the default, right? So let me just hide everything else and just keep the head visible. So we're gonna be able to see this from the inside, okay? So check this out. If I use like a high intensity, 10 or even 5, if I do this, it looks really cool from here, right? It looks like, huh, look at you pinched everything, looks very nice. But then you go inside of the model and look at that. This is the kind of stuff you have to avoid because this is going to influence the displacement map, you know. And then when you export displacement maps, this is going to be a total mess. You're going to get like some very white spots in the displacement map. Obviously, you can go from the inside. You can use like a smaller density for the smooth, and you can actually correct that. You know, it's like from the inside like that. You still keep very pinchy. You know, keep like a very sharp in there, but without having that explosion happening there. So this is another way to do it as well. You know, it's like you can always do, this area here is pretty crazy in there. I'm gonna have to unfold it eventually. You know, probably like at the lowest level, go outside of HD and then, you know, kind of like redo this area here, just try to unpinch it. But like another thing you can do from here, since we are using this as a clue, you can actually use a carve brush with a higher intensity. And you can carve those wrinkles like to make sure that they're sharp from the inside, you know. So from the inside here, let's say I want to make sure that this one here is a little sharper. I can go with a positive brush like that. Let's see, a little bit bigger. And create like a sharp line like that from the inside, you know. Same with this guy here. I can actually continue with it. A little sharper. Then when you go to the other side, you're gonna see like they work and then they are not like exploding inside of the model, right? So we can actually use this kind of technique if you want to try to get like very, very sharp lines and without like compromising, like, you know, it's like inflating things too much or destroying the forms from the inside. Because it's very important that the model doesn't look, you know, it's like the displacement doesn't look exploded from the inside. Now, when I look at this area here, it seems like some of those areas got a little bit more intensity than I wanted. So I'm gonna try to level everything. It seems like there's a big bulge in here now. I'm gonna try to, you know, just like with pressing Alt and then move, I can actually move in the direction of the normals. Just make sure that this whole area is a little bit more, you know, it's like at the same level. So like I use this a lot actually to block the forms and to everything, you know, just like Alt and the move brush together. Like that, bring this down. And then now we kind of like started approaching the wrinkles in there. So we added like the major ones. So we can start like breaking things down if you want to. I can use like a combination of things. I can imagine like, okay, so since I have those bigger ones, I'm probably gonna have like smaller ones starting to come and branch out of it. So I can actually, you know, start carving some of them to break up that whole surface in there. And then on top of this, we're gonna add our little directional stuff. And we should get like some interesting detail going on there. So like a little bit bigger in here. Try to keep like, you know, it's like if you sculpt like some tiny ones, make sure that there's always one of them that's a little bit more hero, you know, that kind of like carries that, you know, drives your eye when you're looking at it. So things kind of like look like they have some kind of hierarchy when you look from the distance. Otherwise, it becomes like just like primary and tertiary forms. So you see like the bigger forms and the super tiny ones, but you never see something a little bit more mid-resolution like this one here, for example. Right, so it's important to actually use a couple of those. Let's keep like blocking this area, and then we're gonna blend everything. So we're gonna keep around here. Let's just carve this one deeper and sharper, and then make sure that it breaks without like following like a perfect line every time. And then all this stuff here, we can do like the opposite. Remember yesterday I was talking about you sculpting the pores first, and then you connect some dots, right? And then you get like a nice detail around this area, you know, with like the pores and the wrinkles talking to each other basically there, right? But here I can actually approach the opposite way. So if I already have, let's see, single pore like here, if I have my single pore, now I can do the opposite. Let's say I want to simulate that this, like, you know, it's like I need more pores in here, obviously, because this whole area is going to be full of pores. So I can actually build the pores right in the middle, not perfectly, but like, you know, it's like some a little bit more offset, but just to give this impression that this wrinkle is actually connecting some of those. And then from here, I can start building towards those guys. And then kind of like blend everything together. So once you have this entire area covered, and then we can start actually using like the a little bit more micro pores, and then just, you know, get everything connected with like micro wrinkles and all kinds of stuff. Let's add some more kind of like at the border in here, and then start blending towards those guys. It's the kind of stuff like you guys don't need to worry if you're using like texturing XYZ, because the only worry there is like we're gonna have to make sure that your Mari files, if you're projecting inside of Mari, right? Like everything is not too stretched, and it makes more sense. But in here, since we are doing like a almost like a physical sculpture, right? It's a simulation of a physical sculpture. Then we have to worry about like placement and all this stuff like much more carefully. We are not getting anything for free here. We are building everything by hand. So now under this area here, I'm not going to be too concerned about you know, pores, because we basically are not going to have a lot of pores in here. But I'm just like concerned about finishing, and I'm going to switch to my symmetry in here so I can actually finish this area here in both sides. So I'm going to be probably like today all over the place, like building a little bit of everything, like pores here and there, and then wrinkles, and trying to blend all together. Let's go around there. And then, like I said, I mean, like over time, you kind of get used to it, and then things get a little bit faster, you know. Maybe the intensity is a little bit too high in here. Let's just get a little bit lower. Around there. And then, yeah, obviously this whole area here, I'm just gonna finish this little chunk. I'm gonna have to actually cover all those little gaps with more detail. And I'm gonna try to do it in a way that's not too perfectly aligned, right? It has a little bit of a randomness in it. So over time, you're gonna be able to finish, you know, this whole thing. And then here, we're gonna start, for example, turn off my symmetry. And then that one is the main wrinkle that we just built. It looks like that. So I can actually branch it out with the smaller ones around it, just to create this kind of like fractal effect, right? So some of them are going to branch out like that, and then some of them are going to go and continue to go all the way towards this direction here. And as I sculpting here, I'm trying to create a little wobble, right? Like, so it's not like a straight line. So kind of like wobbling just a little bit, just to create a little bit more of this organic kind of feel to the lines. And it's the kind of stuff that we take for granted, you know. It's like, but when you render, you definitely can see how the specular behaves, you know, and your eye is actually expecting to see changes in the types of skin you see across the face. That's why it bothers people when we see like everything is the same, right? Like the, you know, all the pores in here you're seeing like it's all over the face. They all look the same at this point, and that's why we have to put extra effort making sure that they have their own characteristics, you know. It's like that they look different from in different parts of the face. So that's a good amount of effort you're gonna have to do just to create that effect. So around here, I'm gonna block some longer ones, break into slightly smaller ones, and I'm gonna go a little bit more towards that area. And then from here, I'm gonna go the opposite direction. So do some of them like that. Try to not keep a little bit more variation in there. And now we're gonna have to actually build up some of those guys. Let's see from here. Get some of those the smaller ones too. All those in betweens. Because it's kind of like a, the thing is like the thinner the skin is, the base, like you're gonna have to go like very small with those wrinkles, right? Like if I do something like this, for example, like a big one like that, that shows me that's a very thin, very thick skin in there, right? But if you use like those tiny little ones like this, it gives the impression that the skin is actually very fragile and thin. So that's why I'm doing like kind of like smaller ones in there, and then over there, going to start like blending towards the pores. So I'm going to go over here, I'm going to keep blending them and building those guys to be like thin. Sometimes I have to look from a distance too, because if it's getting too repetitive, then I can actually start merging some of them into bigger forms. So we don't have like a, you know, a lot of those little, all of the same intensity. So I'm going to merge those two. I'm going to go back in here, smaller again, maybe a little larger in here, and then definitely a larger one around here. I was like trying to feel the texture of the skin, you know, it's like as I sculpt, like almost if you can touch it, you know, it's kind of like we are very tactile, right? Like we touch stuff to feel if it's like soft, you know, it's like cold, hard, whatever. That sounds a little dirty. No, that's not intention. But yeah, so it's almost like it's something that I tend to do, and I was like just like try to imagine as if this was like a piece of actual clay or whatever, you know, just like how would my thumbs feel when I, you know, touch like those major wrinkles. And so let's see, just bring this one into more of like a little bulge right here. And around this one here as well, I'm gonna bulge out a little bit, because you have to imagine like every time you have a wrinkle like that, it's basically like it's almost like two giant waves colliding and create that little compression in the middle. So you have to understand like those are like big masses, right? Like if it could be like a you know, microscopic and go in between here, this would look like a giant like a canyon, right? And then you see like it's basically like those masses of land in here kind of like colliding with each other. So every time you sculpt, you try to imagine that, you know, it's like there's a lot of compression going on. So let's go back here in resolution a few times so I can actually build this area a little bit more without affecting the pores that much. Well, this affects a little bit, but if we are careful, it doesn't affect that much. And then I'm going to build up this one as well. And this is the kind of stuff like I keep going with it, right? And just building more and more stuff. And we kind of like don't feel when we are doing it. But then later on we watch the video, you know, it's like, and you see like there's a lot of stuff that was done. And we kind of like don't feel it because it's just like very subtle changes and just like building up the structure we have. Yeah, she has this interesting line here that I mentioned before. It's almost like there's a flat triangle in here. I can show you her face around here in the eyebrow, you know. There's this line in there, kind of like creates a little triangle in there. So I'm going to be building something like that. Let's see. Kind of like that form, actually. It looks pretty cool. He adds a little bit of, you know, it's like a kind of worried kind of look to her. It's almost like she's a little worried or something. It's like there's this line, and then it goes towards the your temporalis line right there. Okay, and then here, I'm gonna just build up this area a little bit with asymmetry. And one thing I'm gonna have to plan as well is just those wrinkles in her forehead, right? Because at this point here, I only have a few things sculpted when it comes to pores. So first I'm gonna have to complete the pores in here so things are easier for me. So I'm not gonna touch that right now. But around this area here, I'm gonna try to focus more and more on it. Let's try to build this a little bit strongly here. And then break up this whole area forms a little bit more as well. Add more complexity, you know. Try to add some more of the stuff that I'm observing here. So like there's a little bit of a depression in here, a little bump around there. And then she's gonna have like a few very well defined like wrinkles right around here. So one's gonna be going towards here, like that. And the other one's gonna start going towards, like gonna go up and across some of those. But since those lines are not like the definitive ones, I'm gonna be sculpting different ones. So I'm not gonna go too crazy about going over them. Just gonna try to focus in this area here first. Build up in there. I'm gonna start like from here. I can go a little bit more towards the eye in here. But then I'm gonna start flaring more towards what I have in there. So basically like from here, it starts like flaring towards the nose itself, like that. And the same is gonna be true in the other side. So I'm gonna have to do a change of direction right here. And then I'm just doing like very faint so I can actually just retouch it. But yeah, so this stuff is gonna change. I'm gonna have that shape in there. And around here is gonna be the same, right? We're gonna have those little bit stronger ones going towards the middle right here. Pick like a little here one right there, a little bit stronger. Like that. And this one especially has to be much stronger. There. And yeah, there's so much stuff, I mean, like to cover here, because it's a lot of wrinkles. When you sculpting someone younger, you don't have to worry too much about this stuff. Obviously, you have to worry a lot about the subtleties, which can be much more challenging than sculpting someone old, because you can actually hide a lot of stuff when someone is old like that, just like by winging those wrinkles. So it's a fine line, you know. It's like it's a lot of fun because you have more forms to observe, and but they are not like at the same time they're not like subtle forms, you know. It's like everything is very right there on your face, and ends up like that sculpting someone younger with less detail. It's harder because everything is in the subtle details or the subtle forms, you know. But I try to observe those subtle changes as well in the older people, and I find lots of really interesting little things, you know. It's like in the face you can actually incorporate. It's almost like you know, when you play a video game and you go like from stage to stage, and then each one of them have all those little things, you know. Especially if you play like Nintendo games like Super Mario, you know, there's always like those little secrets hidden in there. And with the face is the same, you know. It's like you sculpt different people, and you always find those little secrets, you know. It's like those little areas where things are a little hidden in there, and then you notice like a subtle change in the forms, and you was like, huh, how is that created? And I was like, what's causing that? And then you try to investigate and you sculpt one time. Sometimes you don't get it right. You go to the next one and you start like, oh, I kind of get it now the way it is, you know. That's kind of, it's this exercise that we do as artists, just like trying to figure it out things, you know, which is really cool. Just go back in resolution a little bit higher, because I noticed that all those little lines in her, they actually extend way further down. It's going to go down in resolution one time. And then, for example, if I start around, right around the eyelid in here. So if I cut some of those lines around there, that adds a little bit more of like an organic feel to it already. And then I can start building up towards the brows in there. And then I can actually build some more of them around here, crisscrossing with the other ones that are actually going more towards the nose. So around here, let's see, let's put one more. Another one, I'm gonna go towards this area here. I'm gonna break up this the silhouette around the edges in here. So I'm gonna break up some of them. So basically like changing direction. So those ones go and connect towards the eyebrow or the center here. and then those ones go, and they kind of go towards the outside. So it's kind of like a different direction. But obviously there's a bunch of them actually gonna go and create some of this crisscrossing right there in the middle as well. It's gonna go right there. And then some of them we're gonna inflate or build up a little bit more, especially those ones in this area here, right where you have like this cavity. It's important that we build some little bridges in there. So I'm gonna do that to show you guys. Just like blocking some stuff in there. So now let's build some little bridges in here, which is around here. So right in the cavity, I'm just gonna build up some of those guys going across it. It's almost like crossing the little river in there. And then just like to have a little bit of more of that tension, right? Like it's like if you're stretching the skin, basically like it's gonna be kind of like a piece of cloth, right? You stretch it, it's gonna have to go across that whole area. And then again, if I look from a distance and things start getting too repetitive, just go and blend a few of them, you know, and making like a larger form and then some smaller ones. Have to always go like back and forth. Sometimes you get too focused, hyper focused in one single area from like a close up like that. And you kind of like lose yourself in there, and then you think like you're in a nice ballpark. And then when you go from a distance, things they're just like terrible, they don't work. So from time to time, just like, you know, sculpt some and then go from a distance and see how those lines are. If they're, you know, for example, right here, I can tell that some of those can be simplified. So this one I can actually connect around here. I'm gonna build a little bit more of those little bridges underneath here. Make sure that the skin reads like very flexible. Not so much for an older person, right? Tends to get a little bit more stiff and thin, not so elastic anymore. All right, just smooth it out a little bit. So let's go back to the other side. I'm gonna try to do a similar approach. It's not gonna look the same at all, which is important since we are trying to keep the curious eyes away from recognizing like a lot of symmetry, right? So we're gonna build up some stuff like in order to make it very different from side to side, we're gonna have to build everything asymmetrically from this point on. And then the asymmetry here is kind of like isn't like a mid-level asymmetry I'm building. But then later on, I'm gonna actually look from a distance and really pull and push like some of the larger forms around to make sure that he reads more asymmetrical. At this point, just like the smaller detail is asymmetrical, but everything else is completely symmetrical. So we have to break that impression as well. I noticed that in the reference, this whole area here looks a little, you know, too built up. I'm gonna just remove some of that bump right here. Turn off my symmetry. Go to the lowest resolution. And I'm gonna actually just incorporate a little bit more of depth right around here. Just bring this closer to the level I see at the top right there. And then this one here, I'm actually gonna get a little bit more volume as well. A little bit more puffy in there. Let's get maybe like the move brush just to help out a little bit. Just gonna expand this area a little bit. Also using the Alt when I'm moving stuff around so I can actually get this control. Make sure that things are kind of like nice and round. So let's just like go lower a little bit. Oops, I think that little part there looks a little weird. Smooth it out a little bit here. All right, so let's go back to here. And then let's explore some of the bumps as well. I mean, like we're doing this very early phase of like building wrinkles and blending things with the pores, right? So we still have plenty to go in there. We built like some of those wrinkles here today. So let's add some of those bumps, you know, it's like some of the pimples and little moles. So let's go to that brush I showed you guys yesterday. Let's see if I can find here because I closed my computer, and then so I'm gonna have to find things again. So let's see, skin pores, liver spots, blah, blah, blah. I swear I have to do a little skin bump. Let's try that one, elastic. So this is a bump elastic, and this one is connected to a spray. Let's just see what this one is doing, for example, and I can show you the settings. So this one here, you see, like it's very strong, right? And it's based on the elastic, so it's not destructive. I mean, you would preserve, for example, like pores and stuff. But if I go to a lower resolution, let's try with something like this. Start to get more interesting, and obviously it would not work that well in an area that's completely empty like this. But then in an area like this, you get more variation, you know, instantly, just by adding it in an area that's already populated in there, right? So for example, like from here, let's compare this with this, right? You get like a lot of those little micro bumps in there. You can do the opposite as well. For example, like you can do like a, you know, kind of like, in this case here, I mean, like the quality of them, they are supposed to look more like, you know, it's like they have a fall off that's very sharp around it. So they kind of like can be used for this area around the bags in here that I showed you guys yesterday. But obviously you could use like a different type of fall off. For example, this one here is using, let's see, what's my profile for the alpha? It looks like this. So it's actually on purpose creating that kind of like a very sharp kind of fall off in there. But then I have this, this other guy here. Let's see, this other bump. Let's see what this one does. This one is a much more concentrated and rounder, you know, fall off at the end. So it's a different alpha, and the profile is still the same, but the alpha is different. So instead of like using, you know, it's like a 39, for example, that makes a little bit sharper. I'm using something like, let's see, like maybe 35, which is more like this, right? Now, for example, if I exaggerate here so you can see the how this thing is working, it's basically like it creates a little mass like that, right? And it's based on the elastic as well, as you can tell in there. But if I want a little bit more space between them, you can always tweak your spray. Instead of like a flow of 0.25, I can put all the way to 0. And now things are a little bit more spread out, right? So also here, for other controls you can use, for example, the flow already reset in there, but I mean like the placement here, I can actually increase to 1 and then reduce the size of it. And now I get a little bit more space between them as well. So now this is at a very high intensity, but if I go like lower like this, you can start getting a little bit more of a random result, you know, it's like creating some randomness to the skin. Let's try maybe a little higher. You know, it just adds a little bit more of these lumps in there. If you do the opposite, for example, with Alt, you can create this type of effect as well. And it can be useful for certain areas. Obviously, you're not going to cover the whole model with this. But for an area like this, for example, I could incorporate something like that, like very, you know, subtle. So I'm doing it around here. And then move to another area and start like adding some more of this stuff, you know. Around here, for example, it might look a little weird. So I'm going to have to actually pick my battles in here, but I probably would use something like that, for example, the negative one around here, just slightly, get some of those depressions in there, and some of them a little smaller and then positive. So around here, for example, just get a little bit more of this, you know, effect without being too crazy, obviously. If you do too much of it, then everything gets very lumpy, and then it doesn't, you know, it doesn't look good at the end. But if you're careful with it, you can get a lot of interesting stuff with it. Now, you can always sculpt stuff by hand as well. So with the clay build-up, which is like, is very destructive, right? If you keep like doing the same area, you're gonna remove some of the detail. But maybe that's what we want. For example, if I turn off my symmetry, and let's pretend she has a little scarring or something around here, I can actually go with the clay build-up and you start like erasing some of that. I can even use like instead of like a round brush, I can actually go back to my square one and just like use that to dig like an area that looks more like a little scar, you know. Little things, you know, you can do to the skin that just like add a little bit. See, like right there. Let's add another one around here. Especially someone older, you know, it's like definitely gonna have something going on. Their face is like maybe like the corner of the lips. So you see, like it looks almost like a chicken pox kind of little scar in there. So let's go like to the individual bumps now. Let's see. I have, I think, a few in here. Let's see. That's the skin bump, skin pore depth, pimple. So let's try like the pimple 2. So this is the one that adds this little big bump like that. But that's because we are using a very high intensity. So let's try with lower. So we get something like that, right? So that kind of little pimple in there can be used like for moles. Let's try something around, let's see, around here. And then let's add a bunch, for example, like right around this area, a bigger one around here, around there. Oh, that's too symmetrical if I do both the same side. Let's see, like that. Maybe like a few in here. She has some like actually darker ones. So let's go back in here. So she has one right in the corner of her lips, which is a little awkward. We can even add a little bit more intensity to it. Right around there. Sometimes you can do multiple passes, you know, so you can get a little bit bigger. Maybe a little offset from each other and create a little cluster. And let's see, around here, maybe a little bigger. And then on top of this whole thing is going to be like the micro wrinkles. Those going to do like miracles for like directional things, you know. So let's try incorporating some of that. Let's just add some more of those little pimples maybe around the chin in here. Let's try one here, one there, and there, and there. Cannot make too many, otherwise it's going to start looking like she was, you know, bit by lots of mosquitoes, like 1,000 mosquitoes, right? But if you do like, you know, bigger ones and then smaller ones with, you know, with changing the intensity sometimes, then you can get some interesting effect, you know, like to look more natural. So like a big one with a low intensity, and then you're going to go for some negative. I can add some negative ones. Maybe around the wrinkle in there. Around here in this cavity. And then let's add some more directionality here. So for example, like right in her skin around here in the cheeks, we're going to be building some stuff. Like let's go to 2 subdivision levels lower. First, I'm going to add some more direction to those pores by sculpting on top of them. So basically like what we started doing yesterday. So I'm going to just carve right on top of them. Add like little lines like that. And then trying to pull them down like that. And then around here, we're going to start actually curving them towards the nose. So we're going to start adding some more direction towards the nose in here. And then again, back in here, starting to flare out. Let's go to a higher res just so we can see what's going on. So they're starting to look a little bit more interesting. The important thing is to break that like orange peel, like super even, completely round feel that all the pores have when you first apply them. And think about that as a way to actually create like areas of interest, you know, like with different types of skin. And then you can always do like some cross hatching as well here. For example, like if I go around there, I can actually go back and then change the direction and create a little bit of a cross of those details. And then from here, this side here, sometimes what happens is that it starts curving this way. It creates a curvature in there. And then from here, you can actually start blending those towards the outside. create like lots of like secondary lines in there. And I'm gonna carve a little bit more of this line that we started the other day. I'm gonna break it up multiple times here. Starting here, gonna bring towards the corner of the nose. Start blending those ones as well into more secondary micro wrinkles. And eventually we're gonna have to level everything, you know. It's like some of those major forms, they are kind of isolated. So you basically like use like smaller ones around them just to help them to you know, blend in together with their little relatives in there. But like you see, like all of those I'm building here, I'm looking for the direction that I marked yesterday, but at the same time looking for those neighbors connecting to each other. And it always starts the same way, you know. It's like just like I did those ones to become more directional like that, I can continue that line and just like connect to the next one, you know, and basically like make everything look more like stretched in a way. Nothing stops you guys from actually creating a pore that's stretched already, you know. So for example, like you can sculpt a pore and stretch that, or even in Photoshop, get the same alpha that you just saved and create a stretched version of it. And then when you're sculpting those pores, you can actually sculpt them already stretched straight away, you know. This way I'm doing here is basically, I like doing it because it's kind of like, it feels more like what I would do if I was sculpting something with clay. But then nothing stops someone, for example, from creating like a stamp for clay that already has that shape. You know, like I said before, some people were actually trying to already doing some 3D printing of like little stamps for clay. And I saw someone selling like little rolls. Actually, you can actually roll over the surface and create like some skin detail, which is really cool. Someone posted at some point like on Instagram, I think. And also another thing I noticed is that some people are sculpting irises in CG, and then 3D printing them, and then using them to put in their traditional models. You know, the like practical models. So like silicon models or whatever it is, but the iris is basically sculpted in the computer, and then 3D printed and then painted. So that's the cool thing, you know. It's like with new technologies. I mean, like some of those traditional artists, they are totally embracing them. Like Rick Baker, you know. Really admire the guy. Never stops learning, you know, and trying those new things. Meanwhile, you see some people like always complaining about like, oh, this is like, you know, being like super conservative about it, you know, kind of like, oh, that's not what our industry is supposed to be doing, you know. It's like we should stick with clay. I was like, no, dude, you should stick with whatever works, you know. Especially if you're trying to deliver a job. If it's your own personal passion not to use it, then I say, yeah, respect that. But if it's to finish like a job, you know, it's like the only way to stay remain competitive is to actually embrace those new technologies that make things easier. And there are a lot of people actually, they are sculpting in clay and then 3D scanning the whole thing and then cleaning it up in the computer. So when they print it, the 3D printing, it's like a much cleaner model as well, you know. So yeah, it's all kinds of stuff. People are doing all kinds of experiments. It's really cool. Good time to be alive. Other than this freaking virus, yes. The rest is actually pretty awesome. This virus is an interesting test, isn't it? Like to see how much we are able to separate between like bullshit and then and what's actually factual, you know. It's like it's very hard to decipher this enigma at this point. So I'm just like waiting and seeing what happens. But obviously being careful, right? Like we have to all take the precautions that we're being told to, just in case. Some people believe it's going to be much worse than we think. Some people believe, no, that's already past the threshold of scare tactics, right? So we never know, man. I've seen like so many conflicting stuff. Like my wife being a nurse, I mean, like she gets like conflicting information as well, you know. It's like from the health department and everything. just hard to know what's going on. Seems like every day something changes, you know. There was a point that was someone was saying like, oh, there's two things are different. For example, like if you sneeze, there is the spray, right? That happens. It's gonna linger in the air. It's gonna stay there for, you know, this many minutes or hours, and then someone else came and said like, no, 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 it's just like it has to be direct contact. You know, it's like it's basically saliva. Someone has to sneeze in your face or towards your face from a certain you know, distance to be able to contaminate you. Otherwise, it's not going to do it. And then they keep going back and forth with this thing. You know, it's like it goes back to like, no, it's airborne, and then all of a sudden like, no, it's not airborne. It's like you need direct contact. So you never know. So just in case, you stay as, you know, home as possible, right? Like, and hope for the best. But I mean, nobody knows exactly what's going on. It's such a weird time. Meanwhile, we're just producing art. Someone posted on my Facebook the other day, like, I think it was Sefki actually. He said, you know, it's so cool to see that in the middle of this whole chaos right now, my timeline when it comes like to people sharing art, it didn't change at all. People keep sharing art, you know, and just like they keep going. I think that's what we should do exactly, you know. Just like to me, like art is part of my therapy, so I don't go insane. I need to do it, and and then I think a lot of people think the same, you know. So you know, it's good that we keep our heads occupied with something productive instead of like being depressed. So I think that's very important for our sanity. All right. So let's see what else I can tackle here that's a little bit more important. See, let's see, those lines here, apparently they are a little bit stronger in her. And I still have to build a little bit more of the detail in her nose, which is going to be, can be a little tricky sometimes to get like the right amount of detail without going overboard. So let's try, let's get some of those little pimples in here. Let's try with the pour brush that I had before. And then let's get a couple like resolutions lower here again. Let's just build some more of those guys. So let's start with this, maybe lower intensity, 20s, something like that. So let's try it even lower, 18. So we're gonna build a bunch of them. And we're gonna start getting a little bit more populated closer to this edge here. So I'm gonna get some more in here. Already with lower intensity, those ones I think I was using 30 something for intensity. This one I'm using like 18 right now. So they're just enough to break up the surface without being too invasive in there. And then around here, I start like getting a little bit more distant. If I need to smooth something out, I'm gonna do that as well. The important thing with the nose to me is like, unless you have someone who has a very deformed nose, like with lots of acne and those pimples and stuff, I would try to avoid doing that overall, you know, noise that some people do in the nose. And I would try to keep like mostly clean, just with a little bit of detail like this, like that little random brush we used yesterday. But try to keep some of those areas cleaner, because we want to make sure that when we have this specular map, that specular map is going to break up a lot around those areas in the cheeks and the muzzle and everything, but we're going to have a fair amount of like shiny, specky tip of the nose, you know? And we're going to be able to control that by adding more or less of the micro bump, right? Which we should be talking about today. So I'm probably going to finish a little bit more here and going to switch back to Maya and then show you guys that part as well. So you see like around here, I'm still getting like some of the detail, but not at full force anymore. So it's like a lower intensity, just to help to blend this whole thing together. Very important to get like those areas to blend and look like it's a transition between like a different type of like skin to another one, and you know, things that with cartilage or whatever it is underneath, you know, it's like There's more stretch, there's more this, more that. I'm just really trying to blend those things together. And then pimples, obviously, you're gonna have to add some positive ones in here. Right now, we're just carving mostly negative, you know, stuff, but we're gonna have to carve the positive ones as well, or build actually. So around here, I can actually use symmetry, and I'm just gonna start blending this more towards the centering here because it's still on the side, so rarely gonna be able to really see the symmetry. And then soon enough, we're gonna break it again so we can actually stay away from too many symmetrical details. So around here, just to build some of the transition. Right around here, I can start actually eliminating some of those. I think they're still in a good spot. I can just disguise them with some wrinkles in there. But I have to make sure that there's a nice transition between those areas. Probably like go a little bit, you know, lower in here. So let's go back in here. Let's keep building this whole thing. And just to be sure you guys got it, like I'm not sculpting at the highest resolution at this point, right? Kind of like 2 subdivision levels lower than that, because I'm trying to, on purpose, make sure that those guys here read much softer than they are. I don't want to get like this little sun flares around each pore, like very visible, because it starts to look a little funny. But rather get like most of the cavity, the little pore, to show up, but without like being like too sharp, right? So kind of like that. Those ones here, I think I went overboard. I can actually smooth them out a little bit. Let's try with a little help of the smoothing here. It might look a little funny. Let's see what it does. Something like that. Let's see if I go higher now, what this is gonna look like. See, like that. Yeah, I'm gonna have to smooth it again. I went a little bit deep with them yesterday. Yeah, that should be okay-ish. So let's go back here to subdivision levels lower, and then build up some more of this in-betweens here. It was funny, like I was teaching a class a couple of months ago. We had an earthquake during the class, man. I was like, wait a second, guys, just a second, hold on. And then the whole house shook. Yeah, there's always something going on to make life fun. I was just like, I just relaxed, and I was like, we are kind of laughing. I was like, yeah, dude, let's just wait for a second. I don't know how long this is gonna do. You know, you never know with earthquakes, right? Kind of like sometimes just like a big shake, it goes away, and sometimes it lingers and stays shaking your house for a while. That one was a big shake. It was not like a long one. It was kind of like just a big shake, almost like a giant truck just passed by your house, and then it stopped. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Okay, so now we have all that stuff in there. Basically what I'm gonna be doing, it's like continue doing more of this, right? And then adding more of the bumps and everything. Over the course of the next days, we're gonna be basically I'm gonna be trying to do more of this offline. And then online, I can just like recap with you guys saying like, okay, so this is basically the technique I'm using, because most of the stuff in here is basically what I'm gonna be doing, basically like repetitive, right? Gonna be doing more of this, kind of like adding more of those lines, like trying to find out what's the optimal direction for them. And then incorporating more of those pimples and bumps and everything. And then obviously you're gonna be building the lips, right? We're gonna start carving them, get some more interesting detail in there. Oops, I thought I had my carved brush, but I didn't. So, you know, I was like, just make sure that we're gonna get some of those guys going, you know, over. But I mean, like I'm just winging here, so I'm gonna just pay more attention to the reference when I really do it. And then let's switch back to Maya and just take a look at the micro bump that I was talking about. I think to do that, I have to actually open another file, probably like the African guy, the African American, or just the African guy, actually, he's not American. And let's just do this. And then I can show you with that one because that involves having a map that I have to paint. Actually, if you guys hang in there, I can actually do this. Let's get out of HD. Since I have to do this for myself, I can, you know, do it here during class, so you can actually, you're gonna know how I normally approach those things with using parts of my previous models, because the whole intention is to actually create something that can share, you know, UVs, and especially like maps. The least important ones, I would say, the ones that are not super specific. Like if you painting the albedo has to be very specific for the character. But if it's just like a depth map for the bump, for the micro bump, and also the specular maps, you can reuse them for multiple characters, you know, just tweaking them and repainting things. But so at this point here, I saved her. Let's just make sure. Yeah, so I saved that one, so the smaller size. And then let's open a previous file. Let's get this one. I'm gonna be preparing a file to actually use some of that stuff that I just built. So let's get this guy here, and then load project. We're gonna get the latest. Make sure that's the latest. Yep. And my intention here, I'm gonna open this project. I'm gonna clean up this the scene a little bit, remove his skin tone or whatever it is, and then actually I can keep the skin tone just to show you guys another trick. And bring the as a sub tool actually back to my scene. So I can actually adapt that whole thing. I'm gonna show you. I'm just talking here. It doesn't make sense, but it's gonna make sense. Let's try that. I'm gonna just clean up this scene here so we can actually reuse some stuff. There you go. So there's the guy. So we're gonna be doing this. Check this out. We are not going to be concerned about this because I'm not saving the project. I'm going to save just the Z tool itself. So I don't need any of this stuff. So I'm going to delete it. I'm going to clean up this whole thing, this one as well. And now you're going to see a couple of things here. For example, I have this SSS map that the only reason I painted this one is just to eliminate some of the subsurface scattering in those bumps that he had before. So the way I did it, I actually copied the color of the RGB that I had in Maya, and I applied it here. And then just for those little points in there, I actually see like I made them a little bit darker. So basically like that eliminates some of the scattering that was a little bit too strong in those big prongs in there. So that's the only reason I have it. But normally I don't have a subsurface color map. You can definitely have one, for example, with if you want to bake some veins or whatever you want to do in there, you can definitely do that, you know, like, or change some colors. But normally just like a plain color works very well across the board, you know, at least my experience. You know, if you need something more custom, definitely go for it. But let's take a look at the other ones here. So this one here probably doesn't have anything. So it's one map that I can eliminate. Let's just switch to flat color. So this one doesn't have anything. So I'm just gonna delete this guy here. My intention here is to clean up the scene. This map here we're going to be talking about, they use for a hair density. So the thing about the hair in with XGen is that you can paint like density maps, and basically like it helps the guides to behave in a certain way. For example, like if I have like guides placed everywhere, so basically like the guides placed over the blue area, the hairs that are all the way to the edge of the blue are going to follow those lines. So for example, if I want to create a split in here, where the hair goes punk from here, right? Goes up and then down from here. So basically, I placed the guides right close to the edges in there, going down, and some of them going up around here. And then when you render in Maya with the XGen, you know, it's like with the area of influence like that, everything is going to create like a perfect split in there. If you don't do that, this whole area where there's a transition between the hairs going down, going up, going to get all confused because it's going to try to interpolate, and then it's going to get very confused around this area. But this helps to actually make sure that you tell the guides, okay, you guys are going to follow that guide because you're part of this blue area, and you guys are going to follow this guide because you're part of the red area. So that's why I used in here, just make sure I have the separation for the hair. But again, like not in this case here. I'm gonna eliminate for now. This is just like hair density. You can paint like black and white maps just to add more or less density. So I'm gonna eliminate as well. I'm not gonna use it for now. This is like an old model that came like from a different model, right? Like a old paint from a different model. So it's always stretched and weird. So it's not gonna work for this one. So this one I think came from Stan Winston. You know, it's like still have the micro veins and all that stuff, but it's a different map in there. So we're gonna delete it as well. Let's see what we can use here. Head, not this one. It's a lot of waste in there. So this one is the specular map that I'm using, right? And there's not a lot of fancy stuff in here. The principle is basically like, yeah, the lighter it is, the more specky it is, right? So basically like around the eyes in there, tip of the nose, you know. But you're gonna notice like areas, for example, like the lips in here, which you normally expect to see a little bit more shininess in there. They're a little darker in here. And also this area here is darker, right? The thing is like the way that I use those maps, like the bump height map, they are completely dependent from each other. So if I show you the bump height, it looks like this. So the way this works is like this. So if I have like a black area, obviously all this stuff is gonna go step by step when I start explaining it to you guys, but this is just like a general idea of how these things, what's the logic behind it. So if you have like a dark area like this, that means that the bump is gonna be very low around here. So like if I have like a micro bump to look like cells, little cells that are gonna break up the displacement into tiny little pieces, around this area, they're probably not gonna be visible at all, right? Same around like the right against the lids. So it's gonna be a very soft surface, same around here. But then when you get to areas like this, a little bit whitish like that, that means that the bump's gonna be higher, and that means that's gonna break up the surface even further. So naturally, you're gonna create more roughness in the specular in those areas, not by using a roughness map, but just breaking up the surface, as it happens with in real life, right? Like as you break further and further the surface, you're gonna get more and more kind of like you know it's like diffuse or you know, a little broad specular. So basically, this map is the one we're gonna be using, and also we're gonna be using this one here, like the specular one, and you're gonna plug some of them, and then I'm gonna plug this right now, but I can explain later how those maps were painted. This one is basically straightforward because I don't use any special brushes, just like something without any alphas or anything. It's just like the regular way of painting it. And I can post as a kind of like a visual reference for you guys. But basically like the painting here is super simple, right? I pick like a neutral color like this. Let's say this one is 51, 51, 51 for the neutral. And then I can go as far as, you know, something like, it's not pure black, but something around like 20, 20, 20. Probably like around the eye, it's the darkest. It's gonna be, yeah, this one is 0 actually, surprisingly. Yeah, interesting, every time you go like to 0 in here, ZBrush has this bug that it turns everything, like the shader goes back to, you know, spec like that. But as soon as you get a little bit more towards some color, like that it switches back to the flat color. It's weird. If you go like towards black, it switches back to, you know, to a blend. And then if you go towards something else here, it's still pretty dark, then it switches back to flat. I don't understand why it does that, but it's a bug. But anyway, so I'm gonna delete all the other stuff that I don't want in here. And the only maps I'm gonna be using here are this bump height map, the specular map, and not even this subsurface I want in here. So like just the color, specular, and bump height. So we're gonna be talking about those. So for the color, you see like, this is like the African guy. And the way I started this one, I was wondering like, what's the best way to approach it? And I started with the regular skin, like a white skin. And then I actually turned it into a little bit darker skin by using this new feature in ZBrush, which is really cool. That is this, I'm just like, you know, talking about the stuff that I should be talking when I'm actually painting the mask, but I'm just excited to share, you know, so I'm gonna share with you guys, and then I'm gonna go into detail later. But this new function under Poly Paint, it's called Adjust Colors, right? So basically, like I started this guy here with the lighter skin, kind of like more pale like this, less contrast. So basically, like it was you know, my previous model had a skin that was kind of similar to this, right? And then just by using those slides here, I start like cranking them, get a little bit more saturation, and then darkness, right? You can go as dark as you want in here. And then basically like doing a bunch of renders. So every time I would tweak this, see like with more, you can actually tell the tones I'm using. Like here it goes almost like completely blend, right? It's kind of like almost like the same color. Then as you contrast, you can see there's more greens in there around eyes and the mouth, some purples in the mouth, you know, around the eyes as well. So you can actually see them better if you just crank it. But the natural color was around here. And so basically I normally export those maps and then do a test in Maya, see how much I have to crank it, you know, it's like make darker or lighter, depending on the character. And then keep adjusting here until I have like a ballpark. And then in Maya, you can actually use a color corrective node and then go further with that, you know. But that's basically like the way I thought it would be easier for me to see the detail, would be to actually start painting the white skin first, and then with this tool actually shifting everything down to a darker tone, and it actually worked pretty well, you know. So I think in the future I'm going to be doing similar stuff. So now let's see why I'm doing this whole thing here, opening this file. So I have my three subtools in there. Let's just make sure that this top one here, this one I believe is HD, so we don't need it to be HD. Let's just delete any HD geometry. So I'm just going to duplicate it. And then I'm going to delete this top one. So now my scene went from 80 million polygons to only 9 million. So that means they are non-HD. And each one of them has a different resolution. So this one, because we had to use HD for it, I went all the way to 1.1 million, which is the same that I have for the old lady. But those guys are going to see they have one subdivision level more. So 4 million, and this one 4 million as well if I subdivide all the way to the top. So basically, like the reason why I did this is because I need to paint the color, the albedo, in the HD model, and it's the same model I'm sculpting and everything. But for the specular map, I don't need that. I can actually export this without any HD geometry because just remember, there's a lot of breakup in the surface happening done by this by the displacement and the micro bump that we're going to be adding. So, you know, it's like any little variation you add to this map here is just like the, you know, the cherry on the top. It doesn't need to be a perfect map. It doesn't need to be a super high resolution map either. So that's why I'm keeping like non-HD, only 4 million polygons, so I can get some detail, but not a lot. And even this one here, I could get away having just like 1 million polygons, or even less than that, because the map is so simple, you know. But at this point, I have like them at 4 million, and then this one is going to be 1 million because that's going to be our main model that we are working on. So let's just save this, and it's going to be under, let's put like under the old lady. ZBrush, and then that's going to be, let's see, head transfer. Head transfer sounds like something. And then let's reopen her. Lady 6. So it takes a little bit now that we have HD, right? It has to calculate all those maps and load them. So there she is. So now let's click this little, let's just delete some of those guys here we don't need. So click this one, delete, this one, delete. And then all clean, let's get the star. And then let's load that tool, head transfer. Right. So let's go one by one here. Let's get this specular one here first. Click the lady, and then I'm gonna just do like an append. And I'm gonna append this guy right there. It's behind her. And then I'm gonna go back to him. Click the last one. Go back to her. Append. Click on it. So I have the second one in there. And then the third one I can actually get just for the color reference itself. I'm going to have to project it. So I'm obviously she's not going to have dark skin, but you can try something here. Just get like a ballpark. You know, I don't think we're going to be talking too much about the color anyway today, but this is going to take like a full class. So I think it's going to be the next Monday. But for now, we just like to have you know, something to work with. let's just do this. So I click that one, I'm gonna append it as well. So now I have the old lady in here, and oh, did I append it? Let's see, I don't think I did. Let's append this guy here. Yeah, so I have the 3 heads in there. And now we have to actually transfer her forms to him. And that's basically what I expect you guys to do if you're working, you know, starting with the same model and then trying to just like reuse stuff from scene to scene. That can save you a ton of time. I'll just delete this old lady here. So that's basically how I do it. I go to the highest resolution, which is like the 1.1 million, right? And I'm gonna export her to a higher resolution here. So I'm gonna call this one, instead of LR or MR, this is gonna be HR, so high resolution. Just synchronize it with whatever I have in there. Number 4, next is gonna be 5. So just export it. And now I'm gonna go to each one of those, I'm gonna import it. So I'm gonna go to specular. Let's make sure that's solo. And I'm gonna just do an import. Oh, make sure that's the same resolution, by the way. So I have to match that. It's at 4.4, go 1 less, 1.1. Gonna import it, HR. Now she's actually stealing his maps, right? They probably like not in the same spot perfectly, but fair, yeah, it should be good enough for our first test. And then in the course of next days, I'm gonna be, you know, adapting this and repainting things. But as a first pass, like it's really gonna give us some results straight away. So same thing for the bump height. So we're gonna just, to see what's going on here, I can show you with this flat color. So this guy here, gonna import as well. HR. Oh man, I did it wrong. Oh, I forgot that I have to match the resolution. So 1.1, let's import again. And that's done. So I have like both this one and this one ready to go. And then the color one, we can do the same. And then we can just like transfer stuff over. So let's go this one. So it's like her skin, she has a stubble in there. Look at that, she has stubble. So I'm gonna keep that one as just as a reference, but obviously later, I'm gonna have to come here if I want to start with something like this, right? Which is not the case. We're gonna be painting the albedo from scratch. I always do. But in this case here, if you wanted to reuse something from a previous character, you could totally start with going to poly paint, for example, adjusting the colors, and then doing exactly what I was doing before. You know, it's like just frame this whole thing. Where is the frame? Frame here. So basically, like I would select that, and then I would go to, let's say, intensity first, lighter tone, and then saturation, bring it down. If it's too pale, I can bring it down a little bit, and then keep playing with intensity and saturation until I find something. And then this guy here, I can actually crank the contrast more or less, right? And then basically if I click OK, basically like it adapts to that new color. But I mean, like this is from a guy, so obviously I'm not gonna be reusing this one, but just showing you guys how you would approach if you have like similar models, for example. So let's go back in here, let's ignore the color map and just export those ones. So the thing is, like when I re-imported those models, I actually remember I exported the base mesh of the old lady and I re-imported into those ones here. So that means that I'm getting the new poly paint, but I'm actually importing the UVs and UDIMs from the new model as well, the one we exported. So I should be fine exporting stuff straight away from here. So let's try to export that. And then let's just name things correctly first. This one's gonna be our spec map. And again, this class is not going to be about painting the maps yet, okay? This is just for us to test the micro bump. So let's do this one. This is going to be like a bump height, or whatever you want to call it. Height. Oh, I was right. I always get confused. Oh, it's like that, right? Yeah, height. Okay, so bump height, and then that's it. So this one here is going to be the first one. To export those maps is going to be very fast. So I'm going to go to the Z plugin, multi-map exporter, no displacement. So I'm going to turn on texture from Polypaint. And I always have this, it's almost like a superstition at this point. In the past, you have to have like your RGB completely at 100% to be able to export stuff. So I always do that. I make sure that's 100%, because for example, if you're doing like a color and then fill object, it's gonna always respect what you have in here. So if you have like a 2% like that, you can actually color, add like, you know, if I'm painting this model, this color here, it's gonna add just 2% of color. So it can do like layers of very thin passes of paint, you know. So I'm afraid that if I don't do it at 100% during the export, it's gonna do something similar. So that's why I keep doing it. But in this case here, the maps can be, let's say, like even 2K would do the job, but they're gonna keep 4K just for safety because I don't have a lot of detail. They are very plain maps. And in her case here, you see like she's still capturing that area that I had like in my African guy, right? With all this starring.
Hey, Chris?
Yes.
Is there a reason why you keep the maps fairly simple?
Oh, those ones here? Yeah, because there's a lot of complexity in the surface itself. And I'm hoping that the surface is going to be doing most of the work. You know, it's like a combination of displacement and micro bump. So the times I tried to add too much complexity, like make things very, very noisy, it ended up like looking like it wasn't as natural as, you know, as using something a bit more plain. So that's the reason. But this one here is basically, I'm controlling areas, large areas of bump height. So that makes sense that this one is simpler, you know, even simpler than this one here. So yeah, it's just, this one is basically like, imagine like, this is just the height of the bump itself, not the bump itself, you know, it's just the height of it.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm gonna show you when I plug this into Maya, you're gonna see exactly what I mean. And then, so basically like switch morph target don't need it here, right? So I'm gonna just create like those maps in 4K. And let's see, it should take just a couple of seconds actually to export the 5 maps. Let's see, source images, bump height. Let's see how long this is gonna take. So that's the first, second, third, fourth, and then the last one, fifth. Cool. So this is like all the bump. So 29 seconds, not too bad. Let's do the same for the spec. So the spec is already named in there. So it's specular, and then let's do the same thing. Create all maps. All right. 2 more. And we're done in there. Okay, cool. Let's just save this one now that we have all those subtools in place. So let's see, ZBrush, and then this one, 7. And let's switch back to Maya. So here in Maya, we're gonna do something first. We're gonna create like a, first, like she doesn't look anything like the model that we have right now. Maybe I can import like the new one just in case, since we're gonna be doing some render tests. Let's do, you know, it's like the neck now is much more neutralized, right? So let's do that. Let's just get to the mid-res, 69,000 polys, export, and then OBJ. It's gonna be our mid-res 5. So 5 mid-res. And then let's just do the morph targeting here. So this one, import to OBJ, mid-res 5. Get this lady, select first, select next, deform, blend shape, A, done, and then delete it. So now it's already ready to go. Cool. So let's do like, let's create a little shader here. That's gonna be a different shader. Let's, first I'm gonna eliminate everything here. If your shader network's looking too, you have too many nodes in there, you can always do edit and then delete unused nodes. And it kind of cleans up the whole thing for you. So now let me just create a simple shader in here. The Arnold shader, that's like the Uber shader. It's called the AI standard surface, right? They can do anything with it. So, and then obviously not anything, but I mean, most of you can go like from metal to skin to rubber, whatever you need, you know, it's like you can build a donut with the standard surface. So this one now I'm gonna call just like a micro bump or macro bump. And then I'm gonna just assign this one to her. And this is a brand new shader, right? I'm gonna make sure that this one at this point doesn't have a lot going on. So for example, subsurface is gonna be, oh, that's not the one. Okay, this one. Subsurface at 0, right? And then the base is at 8, 0.8. I'm gonna bring the color down, so it's gonna be more of a gray shader, so I can actually see the detail better. And then not even the displacement we need at this point. So I'm gonna just, make sure that this lady here is not even subdividing. So let's see if she has any displacement here. Nope, just that one. And I'm gonna just select the model itself. Oh, I hate this dual monitor thing with different resolutions. So I'm gonna go to my model in the attributes under Arnold, where you normally put the subdivision levels. I'm gonna just reduce this to, just 2, so it's faster to render, or even 1. And she has a different shader now that's a very plain shader. So let's do a render here, see what happens, just to make sure that's working. Computer was sleeping. There you go. So now you see, like, it's very, very specky, right? It's not exactly what we want at this point. So let's go back here. And also what we're gonna do, just reduce the amount of samples, something around 6, so we can test faster. And even the subsurface at 3. So the renders should be faster now. Cool. And now let's assign a little shader in here, a little node, like a bump map, right? So the first thing we're gonna do is gonna be this. So if you click in your shader itself, the top node, you're gonna go to around here. I actually have more access to more information in this tab sometimes than this one. For some reason, I think I don't know why it happens, but sometimes I lost some. I lose some of the other nodes in here. But in this case, it's showing everything, so fine. Let's just do it here anyway. So I'm gonna go back in here all the way down where it says geometry. Just like click the top node, right? Go to geometry, and then here you're gonna see where you plug your bump map. So basically, what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna plug 2 different maps, right? Actually, in this case here, just one at first, and then next we're gonna do the next one. So I'm gonna click this little checker, and first we're gonna do this. I'm gonna select, let's do, actually, you see, like, you have those nodes in here that are from Maya. So you have noise, you have all this stuff. But if you go to Arnold itself right here, if you click in texture itself, you have an AI noise and AI cell noise. So I'm gonna click the first one. And then the AI cell noise, basically, like, I don't have like I have like an outer color RGB, but the bump only accepts like one color, right? Like, which is basically like it's kind of like an alpha. So I have to pick one of them. So I normally pick like the red channel. So I'm gonna click channel red, and I'm gonna plug it to the bump value itself. So where's the bump value? Right here. So now it's plugged right there, right? So let's go see what's going on in here. And those are the attributes of the shader. So if you do just like let's do it like interactive render so you can see what changes in here. You can close that one. Actually, this one as well. This one. So let's just see what happens here. So right now you have this very large bump, right? Everything's a little weird in there. So let's see what happens if we change those things in here. So octaves are gonna change, let's say 3. So we start to get more breakup, right? And then there is a bunch of different patterns in here. And there is one here that's pretty cool. It's called alligator, right? That breaks things up like this. It's like it creates this very interesting shader that has all those little breakups. But then you can play with those other values in here. For example, the linearity in here. This one is gonna add more or less complexity. So if I go lower here, it's a little bit less breakup, see, it's more faceted. And if I go higher, things break up further into more and more iterations, right? So I can keep a value that's slightly higher than that. Actually, let's keep it low first so we can actually count how many of those we have. So we can actually define the scale in here. So if I go higher, let's say 20 by 20 by 20, see I'm going higher here, but the amount is like it's getting lower, right? So now I have like a nice little bump. It's all procedural, right? But it might be it's hard to see because the intensity of the bump is too high. So let's go back in here, click this little arrow here. So I'm gonna reduce the bump height depth to around like, let's say like 0.1. It's much lower now. Let's see, even lower than that, 0.05, something like that. So I can actually see with the specular what this is all doing. So a good area to test would be, for example, like around the cheeks in here and the nose. So you can actually see, let's see like a close up like that. You see it's still pretty bumpy, right? Like it's very, very big bumps right there. In terms of scale, it's gonna have to be probably like maybe half of that size. And then in terms of bumpiness, then we're gonna basically like calibrate the relief with the map that we exported, the bump height. So I'm gonna do this even lower. So 0.0, let's say 2. Starting to get more specs, so 0.01. It's very sensitive to those amounts in there, right? So now it's sketching some specular, which is cool. And you have those tiny little bumps in there, but maybe the size is still a little bit big. I'm gonna try to increase maybe like 50%, like 30, 30, 30. So it's like a much smaller size now. Let's see what's going on in there. So it's kind of like it's a little bumpy right now. But as soon as we start cranking this one linearity back, it should actually break up those little things a little bit further. So let's see how this looks like with a little bit more linearity there. Yeah, it looks a little bit more natural now. So this is basically what we're going to be using to actually break up the displacement map even further. So as you can tell here, just by breaking up the surface, remember when you have this at 0, everything is very shiny, right? Like you got like almost like it's completely plasticky. But as soon as you added this, the surface being broken like this, it's like you're breaking down things. It already adds this natural look of roughness to the surface. So that's the principle we're going to be using to create like artificially this roughness in certain areas. So for example, if we need a little bit more roughness in the cheeks, we keep the bump a little higher, the values a little bit higher. And then same for everything else, So at this point here, you have the choice also. I can show you just in title like curiosity here, but I'm using the alligator skin, right? So let's just, I'm using like 1.5 here. Let's just try to remember that. And then, so for example, if I use a scale like 10 back in here, just so we can see what's going on. So that's the alligator skin right there, right? But then you have other stuff you can try here. For example, like you have the cell itself. So like click cell here. And by default here, it's pretty big. Let's try amplitude. Maybe this one I'm gonna have to crank the depth a little bit more to be able to see it. There's a trick in here. There's one time that this shows up actually. Let me see if I can find what's the amount here. It's like the amplitude, no. Like linearity, no. I remember like cranking one of those. And then density, randomness. I don't remember, like there's one of them that actually made them show up much stronger than it was. But I'm gonna have to take a look. But yeah, like I used one of those in the past that wasn't it wasn't the alligator skin. The alligator skin is cool because it produced the effect like straight away. But there's one of those, man, that I really don't remember now, that actually can create like a nice little texture as well. I'm gonna do some research and show you guys. I have to open some old scene, I guess. But for now, the alligator skin should work. So I'm just gonna reverse it back to 1.5 in here that we had before. This one's gonna be back to 30, 30, 30. And this one here, the bump depth that I was using like 0.010 to be able to see them, right? Now, instead of using this slide, we're going to be plugging the maps we created. Remember the map we just created, this one here, right? So this is going to be controlling the depth of the bump in different areas of the face. So let's just click here and then plug those maps. So let's go to bump depth, file, turn off this guy here. Let's turn off the render as well. And let's just going to eliminate my generate TX files or textures. And then let's just plug the maps in here. So we have the spec and you have the bump height. So let's plug the bump height. Then I'm going to click the Mari tiles. Make sure it captures all the maps, 5 of them, right? Now, if I just render straight away, it's not going to look right. You're going to see something here. There's not a lot of difference in the, between the areas in here, right? But now what happens is that that map, when I painted in ZBrush, I painted it fairly dark. So that means I'm going to have to calibrate that map. I can do this inside of Maya here. So there are a couple of things you can do. For example, the first one, you see I'm using color balance, and I'm using like it's not a color map, right? It's just like a black and white map. So I can actually switch to alpha as luminous, right? When I click on it, I can already see some stuff going on in there, right? So it's much different than this, right? So alpha as luminous is the first step. And now here, there's the alpha gain and the alpha offset. So let's see what happens in here if I do some offset. If I crank the offset in here, it goes back to not specular at all. Let's see what happens if I do this with the alpha gain now. Now I'm getting less and less of the effect until I get like completely shiny, right? So I'm gonna have to find here the sweet spot where I'm getting like a little bit of both. Basically, like the dark areas are starting to differentiate from the lighter areas, you know. So let's go here. Either you paint like a map that actually shows a nice transition between pure black and pure white, so you can actually plug the map straight away in Maya. Or if you paint with something that looks a little darker like this, like I did, then you can actually, you have to actually search for those, you know, the perfect spot in there where you can get like some areas with no bump at all and with some areas with more bump. So at this point here, I can still see a lot of bump around the lips. So if I zoom in here, I still see it in there. So let's try to add some offset or negative actually. Let's see, let's try with the negative offset here. Let's see, -1. Actually, it's not gonna work. Yeah, that's a balance that sometimes is tricky to find. So 0.1, yeah, it's still pretty high. I think I'm gonna actually concentrate in just like the alpha gain itself for now. And then eventually what I can do is go back to Maya and then actually tweak that color to reflect. I can try this now. Let's see if I can control this color a little bit better by doing this. Let's try go to the highest level. And then under, where is it? Polypaint. Let's try to use that little trick with adjust colors. Might be a good opportunity to do that. And then let's see under intensity, like let's crank it. And then let's get some more contrast. And maybe we can actually blur the whole thing after, so it doesn't look too funny. It's interesting, there's some color in there. It's not just black and white there. I see some color as well. A little funny looking. Yeah, this way I don't need to actually correct too much in there. I can just go for like complete black and white. Oh, there's another thing that I forgot to mention. I'm gonna do this now, but there's one thing I forgot to do in there too. I'm gonna show you guys what it is. You see like what's happening here? It's like it's a black and white map, and then you know, it's like those areas here are supposed to be the ones with the least amount of depth. And sometimes what happens is that we paint things the reverse, right? So for example, like we tend to paint like if we want a more reflection of the nose and the lips, you'd probably do the opposite. We'd paint everything black and then just add whites in here. If you do that way, you can actually go to Maya and add like an invert in the node. I can show you where it is. And then that works. But in my case here, it's funny, look, like when I spin around, the color fixes itself. Then when I stop, it kind of like breaks. It's so weird. Not a bug in there somehow. But what I'm gonna do here, I'm gonna smooth it out, this whole thing. So let's make sure I can do that. Let's see, switch to smooth all the way. And then just RGB. Let's see if it's too much. Yeah, that might help. Just gonna do some smoothing here in general. Maybe like a subdivision level lower. Some weird coloring here that happened. I don't know why, but just gonna smooth it out. It's actually good. It's actually blending things a little better. I'm gonna re-export this map here as well. It's funny that every class I keep like fighting, you know, to get those colors blended using the node in Maya, and then you know it's like so much easier if I just like fix the intensity around here. Let's try to blend things to make it a little bit smoother. Yeah, here as well. Maybe too strong. Let's try like that. It's too strong. Interesting how strong it is. Yeah, so at this point here, just like I just want to capture the color. I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna have to tweak this map for a good chunk of time now. But let's just export this one again. Subtool, bump height, rename.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
You tweaked the wrong intensity when you smooth.
What's that?
You tweaked the Z add intensity. That's why it's still really strong, because it's the color that you're adjusting.
Oh, that's true. Like I had to tweak the RGB. Sorry, but that's okay.
Yeah.
I think it's fine. But yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, I was like, huh, interesting. Anyway, I only used ZBrush for like 12 years, man. I still learning, you know. Oh my god, such a hack, man. Let's go here and then export this. Source images. There you go. So that should take just a few seconds. That way, at least I don't need to fight it, you know, because otherwise I'm gonna have to find, like, probably gonna have to use some negative values in Maya to be able to accommodate that. So let's see if with this new maps, I can simply just plug them and have a result that's more straightforward. Okay, I've got the 5 of them. Still saving the last one. Is it done? I think it is. Let's switch back here. Yeah, 26 seconds. Okay, let's bring this one up. And now I probably can go back to, let's zero everything here and see what happens. Still a little high, but probably like the difference between blacks and whites is gonna be better. So let's see if I'm getting still some bump around here. You have to remember that to get that tiny little value that we were working before, I had to use like a 0.01, right? So that means I might have to actually bring this down slightly lower to be able to get like a similar value. But I can see the difference already. Like I have some more shininess in there. Let's see if the eyes, see the eyes are very shiny around there. And then here, starting to get much more diffuse. This is way too diffuse because remember this little pass has to multiply with the displacement map itself. So we cannot go too high. So let's try smaller than this, 0.05. And if this is too low, then we can actually increase slowly. Yeah, this is like, I see the micro breakups in there, right? It's gonna get a little bit more rough. But then combined with the displacement map, we should get a nicer result. Let's see, that's a little shiny in there, this is good in there. Maybe I can go higher a tiny little bit. This is gonna be kind of like the trial and error, right? Like you're gonna have to keep like tweaking it until you find a sweet spot. But at this point, what I'm gonna do here, since we have this new old lady, so let's go to this subdivision level, export it. OBJ MR, this is gonna be MR6, let's do 6. Then this is gonna be low resolution 6. I'm gonna re-export those displacement maps because we have some time still, and we're gonna be doing just that today. Just combining the displacement with this micro bump, just to show you the difference between the two. And then, so now I'm gonna just delete the morph target, store, switch, and then import low resolution. And let's export this lady. Gonna be displacement, 8K, switch morph target, and everything else is the same. So create all maps, and then let's go back to Maya and do some more poking around. Source images, yes. Let the computer calculate that for us. Let's go back to this one. Where is it? This one. Okay. So yeah, I can see that's already working in there, but definitely you're gonna need some tweaking, right? Oh, that's interesting. Kind of like stop my render just by zooming in. I think there's something to do with, let's see, window. Normally, yeah, weird. Normally without the 3D manipulation, it doesn't do that. I wonder why it did that. Now it's not doing it. Weird. Kind of canceled my render just by, you know, using the wheel in my mouse here. I noticed that that happens a lot when you're actually using the 3D manipulation, because yeah, that one kind of affects whatever you do in the scene. But this is kind of weird the way it happened in there. So let's just combine this now with our subsurface scattering map. So you still see a little bit too much bump in there, you know. It's like I wish it was just like a little bit more of a little flatter map. I might tweak this one to get a little bit flatter, or maybe reverse it to something, you know. It looks a little bit too bumpy, but it might be helpful when it's combined with the displacement, you know. The intention is to actually help to break up the surface even further. I see that the lips, there is still a little bump in there, but that has to be probably like with the map itself in ZBrush. I cannot see it right now, but probably gonna have to paint that area darker just to eliminate more of that, you know. So let's just replug our older shader network in here. So let's go back here. And then we have this shader here that's called micro bump. And then we're probably gonna find our other one that should be called just skin. So this one. So I can click this one and then this micro bump. So shift, control both. And you can just say graph input and output connections. So we have both now visible like that. You can even bring this one closer, like select both and just bring it closer like that. And then it's a shame that my resolution here has to be 1080p. So I cannot show a lot of stuff. So my cell noise, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna plug it right in this shader here. So you can do this in a very simple way by clicking the skin. And then you're gonna slide down here. This is the old skin texture shader we had. And then under geometry, you can just click this bump 2D with the mid mouse click, like or the wheel, and then drag it to this one. And now it's plugged into there, right? So, or you can just click the normal here and then plug into the normal camera, it's fine too. But now it's plugged in there. It's basically like it's a copy. So we have it plugged for both the test shader and also the skin shader now. This one here that has this the displacement map plugged as well. So it's a good way to test it. So let's go from that. We can save this one. Let's just save this render by doing view stored snapshot. And let's compare with this one here now. We're going to select the model itself and then right click this one and then assign material to viewport. So now it's assigned. So let's do a little render to compare the two of them around here. So let's try that. Maybe like a little small area like that would be good. Something like that. Maybe the eye as well, so you can see the lid in there. So let's try this. And then meanwhile, we are generating that map that has the other detail for the eyes. Oh, and another thing you're gonna do here, you're gonna just like make this whole thing darker so you can actually see more of the detail. The skin went too pale. So let's go around here. There's no crash. There you go. All right, so let's go darker. There you go. So now we're going to be able to see a little bit more detail. And maybe desaturate too. Let's desaturate a little bit. All right. So now we should be able to see both the pores in there combined with this micro bump. And you're gonna start seeing things. Obviously, now I have like very low samples, so it's not like you're gonna be able to see a ton of difference. But let's just crank the samples a little bit so I can see it a little more. And also the model is not subdivided that much anymore, right? So we're gonna have to correct that as well. So I'm gonna stop it. And then let's do a few things here. The first is gonna be clicking the model. And then on the Catmull Clark, gonna go back to 3 subdivisions. I mean, it still renders, right? It's just not displacing. It's basically like making everything more into a bump. But I want to displace a little bit. And then under the render settings, I'm gonna crank my anti-alias to about 8. And let's try that chunk again. It should look a little nicer and less noisy next time. The albedo really brings, life to the character, and that's one of the most important ones. But obviously, we are not even using like a specular map yet, right? Everything is a single spec in here. We're just trying to calibrate those areas and get some areas a little bit shinier than others. But you see, like the micro bump is still acting around here, right? You get a little bit of breakup in there, but then when you get to the very edge, you're going to see very little of it. So you should see like a shiny eyelid in here. Let's see. Oh, it's going to be the last part. Oh, it's because of the calculation of the eye in there and everything. So yeah, see this one here is a much shinier than the other areas in here. But it's cool because it started to get that feel of, there's a little bit more complexity than we had before, right? Now we have like this tiny little breakups in between the pores themselves. And then depending on the shader that you pick, for example, if you, instead of like the alligator, you pick some of the other ones, I have to test the settings to see exactly what I did in the past, but I think I used one of the cell ones, and it had an interesting breakup as well. It's like this alligator is looking a little bumpy, kind of like looks a little bit like too bumpy. But the cool thing about it is that now if you crank the specular in certain areas, you're going to be able to see, let's get like an area like this, for example. Let's get view store, so we can compare this against this, right? So this is the displacement plus this little noise. And then now let's go back in here. And let's, since we have that map exported, both the displacement, 5 minutes and 24 seconds, not bad at all for 5 8K maps. So since we have the model with the displacement, let's just replace the displacement and then go one step further. I'm gonna plug that specular map as well. So what we can do here, before you go too crazy mixing everything at once, let's keep things separated by just switching back to our model with a different shader, like the test shader. So I'm gonna click the model and then just assign the micro bump again. So now we should have back just the gray model. Let's see. And hopefully without the displacement, right? Yeah. So it should be faster to render in there. So now let's just add specular mapping here, which is the one we exported before. All of these are going to be covered like into more details, when we are actually doing textures. But I really want to show you guys like the principle of this whole thing here, the way I approach it. So this is my test shader, right? Like there's nothing else in there, but I can plug just as a test in here the specular. So instead of like the color, I'm gonna be plugging the weight in here, or I can do either. It's like there's a slight difference between the two, but it normally works better as if you plug as the weight. So I'm gonna do that. File. I'm gonna go fast here because you know this process already. I'm gonna just go here, turn off this guy, go back, pick the bump, not the bump height, but the spec itself. Make sure I have all my tiles with UDIM. So 5 of them. And now I can actually go back here and I can say alpha is luminous. Actually, in this case here, because it's actually plugged to what RGB channels, I think like this one should work without the alpha. So let's see. It's one of those maps as well that I'm gonna have to do a, let's see if the alpha is gonna produce. Yeah, the alpha is actually the one doing it. Yeah, I guess like if the map is black and white, it's gonna, you know, automatically switch to it. So basically, like you see, you can see a little bit more of specular happening in the nose, not so much around there because basically like the map is actually working now. So let's play with it. So for example, if I have the index of refraction here, if I crank it more, you're going to start seeing more and more reflection happening, but it's still going behind all the micro bump that you just added, right? You see like in the lips, we don't have a lot of it because as you remember, there's a couple of things happening here. For example, the specular map itself doesn't have a lot of white in there, right? And also the bump height map, this one is making things a little bit more smooth, but this one is countering quite a bit. So I would have to calibrate by adding more white in there, just, you know, if I want to reveal more spec. And then obviously this one here, I could possibly go even lower than this. And just like I suspected, for example, like the upper lip doesn't have any dark in there because it's basically like it's being used from another model. So I would have to paint darker to be able to eliminate some of the micro bump that I'm seeing in the top lip. But this is the kind of stuff we're going to be adjusting slowly now, you know, but just for the test itself here, see like this is starting to get in the ballpark for what I want. So for example, like the nose in here, right? I want it to be more shiny than other areas. And then combined with the displacement map, I should be able with displacement, just add some more detail, like more pores or whatever it is, to be able to break down this even further, right? So since we are here, let's apply the displacement, the new displacement we just brought to this model here itself with this gray shader. So let's do that. Let's click it here, file, get this guy, auto generate, turn off, and then click this guy, and then get the new one, which is the displacement map 5. And then let's get this one to UDIM, right? So now let's compare. So like this is gonna be the before, view store snapshot. And then we're gonna render this one. And it should be faster overall because of the lack of subsurface scattering, but still gonna be a little slow because it's subdividing and all that stuff. So now we're gonna have a combination of, there are 3 maps now. We have the displacement map, we have the little, actually 4 maps, right? If you count the procedural map, that's the little alligator skin, and then a bump height, and then the specular map. So they are all combined in here. And then slowly we're gonna start building up all those levels. Obviously, later gonna be going through all those shaders and showing exactly what's plugged. And then, you know, it's like what's the intensity I'm using for everything when I actually start like when I open my actual skin shader that I use most of the time, you know, instead of this one that I just started for the class. Yeah, when I get like the my go-to one, then I can actually go through all the shader parameters and everything. So at this point, I can see like certain areas are working, like this one. This doesn't work, right? Looks very weird, but around here it works. The specular in here is going to start to look interesting because it's going to get more specky around there. Now, if I want to make sure that this area is a little bit more rough, I have 2 options, right? One of them is to actually increase a little bit more of my the height of my bump by painting a little bit wider in here instead of like completely black. Or another option is to actually use a roughness map. Like I said before, like for my African guy, I actually decided to go with the roughness because it was easier for me to just control specific areas. For example, I just wanted it for the lips and then the eyelids, and that way is, you know, I just decided to go with the roughness. But I could potentially go either way, and I was like add more bump height and just break it up. But the thing is, like sometimes the bump height adds too much of like high frequency detail, and sometimes you don't want that in here, you know. So you rather just like make things a little bit rougher without actually introducing more bumps, right? So that's the reason I think I did for that one. But you see, like from a distance here now, although the specular is a little high, it kind of like starts having a little bit more interesting results, right? Like you get less specular in here, more specular in there, because you're using a combination of breaking up the surface itself with both the displacement and the bump height in combination with your procedural map. And then things just start working better, you know. It's like, and then eventually, like little by little, we're going to be building more and more stuff in here. Obviously, this one is it doesn't have any subsurface scattering here, right? So it's hard to tell exactly what's going on. But if we, now that I have this one working in a certain way, I can actually show you how you introduce subsurface if you want to do it with your test shader. So basically, like, you're going to go to your subsurface scattering around here. You're going to crank it to 100. It goes completely white like that because the scale is wrong. So let's go to our go-to scale, 0.120. Let's start with that. Random walk, I'm going to switch to random walk 2. And then the radius is going to, obviously the color, I'm going to have to bring it down, right? Otherwise it's going to look very white. And then let's pick like a little color in here. Something around there. Not too saturated. Let's see, a little bit paler like that. Not too much. And then for the radius, the go-to color that they normally suggest in the manual is to go for 1, 0.35, 0.2. But I told you before, I tend to tweak those things a little bit. You know, sometimes it gets a little bit too red for me. So maybe I can bring it down a little bit, you know, overall. And then even this guy here can bring it down just a little darker. And then the overall spec in here, it's still a little high. And I'm only using the specular in here, right? So basically, like, I'm using the weight in here and just controlling the roughness of the specular channel. But the thing is, like, I like having the control of a secondary spec. And then normally what I do, I actually plug that same map as a copy to the coat. So basically, like, if I do that, if I open this in the shader network to show you guys, so I have this guy, open this one. Let's just graph just that material, the new material, which is this micro bump. And then let's look at the shader network here. We have our displacement in there. We have our displacement map, bump, and we have the spec in here. So it's going straight to the specular from the alpha. So I can do the same for the, let's see, the coat right there. So let's go out alpha and go straight to coat. So basically it's the same map. Another option is to actually click the map, Control D to create a copy of it, and then have it individually, you know, just have 2 different controls for it. But in this case, I'm using the exact same map to control both channels. Now what I can do here to show you is to actually go to the specular and either like completely ignore this thing here. For example, like put the color at 0, right? So if I render with the color 0 now, this is basically coming from the coat itself, right? So let's see. Yeah, the coat is a funny one because even if when you bring things like to 0, it doesn't quite change a lot. So it's almost like I would have to do individually. For example, like break the connection in here for the spec, bring it to 0, and then go to the coat and then tweak the coat in itself. So basically like this one here, now I can actually play. Normally the values I use are very high for the coat because I want to use it just for like a secondary kind of spec. So I'm gonna use, for example, like if I use like 0.15 or 0.2 for the specular itself, then I can actually use the roughness much higher in here. So let's say like 500 or 450. I think 450 is what I normally use, but we're gonna break down the shader later, so don't worry. So you see, like, you don't see a lot of spec going on in there. It's just like a tiny little bit, and it's very, very broad. So now we can play, for example, like with the color, instead of like using color at the default values here, for example, 0.8 or 1. You can actually, like, if you exaggerate this, it actually accepts it, you know, so you can go past that. So let's try like a 2, for example. Oh, interesting, it's Interesting. I don't know if it's because of the color management. Yeah, it's because of the color management. That's why. But it accepts like positive values like over 1 here, as you can tell. Just because I have color management, for some reason it was locking it. But if I turn it off, now I can actually use, for example, a value of 2 or 3 here, you know, and really crank that spec a little further. Or you can keep it at 1, and then you can actually crank the index of refraction, but that affects the look of it sometimes. But for example, if I do like, let's try 3 here. See, I started getting a little bit more metallic, right? So you have to be careful of the amount you're gonna use in there so it doesn't go too metallic. Let's try around like 1.8 like I had before. Just like, you know, just showing you guys some of that stuff, you know, that I normally use for the shader network. But again, I'm gonna be opening all the nodes to show you, but just showing like how I approach normally to you know, to accommodate all those little passes within the model. And obviously, I'm just considering just one single how you call like a lighting setup in here. And the idea is to have like multiple lighting setups. You can actually go and switch between them, and then see how it works. You know, it's like have a neutral one with like a studio lighting, everything calibrated, and then another one like a bunch of different HDRIs you can test just to see how things work. You know, so you see like right now the specular is very, very broad and diffuse in there. So what I can do now, I can actually incorporate the other this specular here again. So let's just pause it, and I'm gonna replug my the same map back to my it's plugged just to code now. You're gonna just plug back to the specular right there, and now we should have access to both of them in combination. So we have like the broad spec, and then this one, the sharper one, and then the index of refraction. I can go back to something a little bit lower, something like that. Let's see. I'm actually curious about the other eye because we added all that stuff in there. Wonder how it's going to turn out. So you see, you're starting to get a little bit more complex, you know. You have like a specular map now. You have like some micro bump in the middle, some of the displacement stuff. Let's see how the directional stuff turned out here because we added some more direction. It's still looking a little bit round, and actually increase that. And it still looks a little bit like a orange peel, this whole area. So I'm gonna have to actually introduce more variation overall. And again, like because she's an old lady, probably a lot of this is gonna turn into plain wrinkles and not a lot of pores. And I'm probably gonna keep the pores more in those areas like here, and then around the chin, you know, and possibly around here as well. A little bit in the eyebrows, but then for the most part, I'm probably gonna start eliminating a lot of it. Yeah, it's coming along in there. The color really gonna bring this whole thing together. Right now it's just like, yeah, it's looking a little weird. Yeah, all right, guys. That's kind of like what I had for today, but you please, you know, feel free to ask questions. You know, you're over the time, but I don't care. I mean, like if you guys have questions, I can answer now. I can actually try to help out. That's gonna be.
I don't really have a question, but I just gotta say that tip about the pinching between like the eyelids and stuff. It's like it's a lifesaver, man.
For the wrinkles.
Well, no, for like when it pinches and it distorts the displacement map, you know, how it gets super tight, and it's you go inside and
inside of it.
Like, oh man, that killed me. Like from my Gordon Ramsay one, I had no idea what was going on. Like,
oh yeah, dude.
I felt like a big idiot, and then I saw your tip. I'm like, oh my god, like lifesaver. Now I know.
Yeah, I mean, like sometimes it's so hard to control, right? Like, and definitely the inflate is such a good tool. You know, it's just like you have to be very careful. Normally, when I use the inflate, I try to use like intensity 1. You know, kind of like 1, like really, really low, and then just control it. Just like keep brushing it and looking inside and seeing how it's doing it. and then eventually you manage to do it without like too much pinching. But you can always like clean it up a little bit, you know. But definitely like sculpting to the reverse is kind of fun too, you know.
Oh yeah, big time.
Yeah, so you know, it's gonna start like looking a little bit more and more interesting, I guess, like with the next passes. I mean, in the other side, we already did some of those major wrinkles. You see, like those ones we sculpted so far, they're very subtle. I broke up a little bit of the edge in there, so it's starting to show up, but nothing very fancy just yet. So let's try, let's just do a little quick run around here, because I'm curious about it, because since we sculpted it, let's see how it turned out. Just this little side in here. I want to see this area and this area. Obviously, it's not going to look great, but I mean, just to have an idea about what the intensities are, you know, how things are behaving in general. Let's see. Let's try this one around here. And my lighting as well is not catching enough in that specific area. Maybe I can just rotate the whole thing. Let's see. Let's just rotate it. So let's go to another camera and make sure that my lighting click this one, and then let's just go back to, actually I can manipulate right here in real time. Let's try. So the light is coming from the side right there. Maybe I can spin it around a little bit. Let's go from here. Oops. Catch a little bit more light in the front like that. Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, something like that. So now I'm going to be able to see a little bit more of that stuff we sculpted. It's funny because it's really interfering with yeah, the 3D manipulation thing was supposed to be the one that does that crap. But I have it off, and it's still like, if I move around, this is still like restarting the render for some reason. Maybe now that I clicked the unclicked, maybe resetted it. But you see, like, I'm not changing anything, and it's still changing the scene. So restarting the render, which is bizarre. Huh. Yeah, in the past when I had that problem, I always just like turned off the manipulation, and that would work. But for some reason, let me see if there's another setting here. Oh, update scenes? No. Let's try that. Oh, yeah, that apparently worked. Okay, apparently it's this update scenes. You've seen updates. It's like if I, but I guess I'm gonna have to force it on if I change things and I really want to do it. But let's see how those guys are looking at around here. So those guys' intensity, they can go higher. This one definitely can go much deeper than I have. But I want to see some of those guys around here as well, those little bridges. It's very, very scattery as well in here. So it's going to be a matter of like really making sure I find like the right, not only the right depth for the scatter, but the subsurface scattering is highly dependent on the color of the scatter. You know, it's like if you change that color slightly, things change a lot. So like you have to be very careful with it, you know. Right now it's looking super pink in there. So it's going to be a combination of changing that scale a little bit, maybe bring it to 110 or something like that, but also playing with the color of the scatter, you know. Maybe I can even try that approach of like painting in the map, you know, it's like getting the overall color of the scatter, that 0.35 is 0.2, painted like as a plain color in ZBrush, and then going to certain areas and just eliminating some of that, you know. Her skin looks a little bit sunburned, which is interesting, you know. It's like I was reading a paper when we were doing this research about the darker skin, and there are two different things that happen with dark skin. It's not only like the tone of the skin that's important, it's actually how the tone got that way, you know. For example, if you have someone who is naturally darker skin, the melanin in the, you know, it's like the way that the subsurface scattering is going to affect the skin is going to be different from someone who is actually not that dark but got just as dark by getting like suntan, for example. Someone who is working in a farm, and then and someone with a brown skin who just gets a ton of sun and gets like really, really dark, that skin is going to have a different type of scatter happening, because there's a, you know, it's like the dryness and there's some blockage of the scatter because there was a little bit of crust on the top, right? So it's not the same as having like a skin that's completely pure. It's just like has more melanin in it. So the way that the subsurface, you know, propagates inside is different. So in someone like this, for example, in her case, and she has a ton of like sun, sunburn, right? These people kind of like stay outside a lot. Then I would probably have to be more careful with the subsurface scattering to go like way less than this, right? Like it looks very scattery right now, kind of like a little bit too translucent. So it's a matter of like, you know, I'm going to be doing this over time. And, you know, it's like really trying to find out what's the perfect balance for it. But for now, I think it's a good, valid test, you know, to just have something like that so we can actually start testing things. But yeah, guys, so I hope like this one today gave you some tools to just like start experimenting with it. I know I didn't go like into detail about the color painting, you know, but again, this is a simple one. At least this one you guys can try, you know. You can use as a visual reference, this image if you want, but it's basically the principle is like, if you want something to look very shiny and basically like the micro bump basically like bypass completely, you just make it completely dark in that area. So for example, you're not going to get any micro bump around there or inside of the eyes, right? And then everything you need more, every time you need more roughness, more breakup in the skin, then you're going to do a little bit lighter. And then to paint those maps, I basically like this one was just like the regular standard brush with no alpha whatsoever. So you're just like, if you want to copy here, for example, I'm going to add like a little pass in here just to show you. Start with the low intensity, like 2 or 3, for example. Then you can start, oh, that's not good. Yeah, it's because I'm using pure black. It gets into that problem that I told you guys. It switched to another shader for some reason. So let's try this. So yeah, just basically like very broad strokes like that, you know. That's basically the way I painted this whole thing. And switch back in here, get a little bit lighter in there again. So yeah, it's just like broad strokes. Just like try to find out like what's the main areas you want it to be shiny. For example, like in someone who has like a lot of like a sweaty skin, right? Probably like the T-zone is going to be important, right? Which is going to be like you know, chin and then nose and then all the way to the forehead. You're going to get a little bit more like a T, right? It's going to go kind of like sideways like that. But obviously, this is going to be all dependent on how you have your bump, your specular map painted as well. So remember that they can counter each other, right? So if you have something that you're revealing, for example, here I'm revealing more specular because it's a little darker, right? But I can go to my specular map itself and paint that area dark and then counter the whole effect. So I'm going to have more breakup in the surface, but I'm going to have less specular because it's almost like the level of oil in the skin are going to be reducing. So it's basically like you have to be smart about the way that you play with those two maps together. You know, you want more oil in a certain area, then you play with the specular, right? You want more roughness or more shine in certain areas, then you play with this bump height, you know, and then everything is mixed in Maya. So yeah, that's basically what I had for today, guys.
Hey, Chris.
Time to catch up.
Yeah.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
Just a quick question. So in the renders that you're looking at right now, what are the green tones?
Oh, like, this is like it's the kind of stuff, man, that you get like basically like any render I ever tried. I mean, like with V-Ray as well, you know, it's like it's part of the scatter, you know. There is a, oh look, there is a little bump in there. There's that problem that I saw from the inside when I was doing the tweaking there. I'm gonna have to fix. But yeah, it's like it has to do with the scale of the subsurface scattering, and it has to do with the color as well. You know, I tell you that once you have like the colors in place, like the albedo and everything, you don't notice that much. But unless you really start like playing with higher values, let's try, for example, you know, it's back to updating everything. I don't understand why is it doing that. But for example, like if I go back in here. Oh, interesting. Something got locked in there. Okay, so let's try to go to the micro bump in here. so basically I'm using like 0.120 here. So if I go back like to something a little bit more solid like that, you can start eliminating that, but at the same time, you're gonna lose the effect. So it's always a balance between like finding the right amount of subsurface, which in this case here, I think is gonna be the ballpark of maybe like 0.1 or 110. And then the color itself, you know, it's like, which this case here looks a little bit too saturated. Let's try. Yeah, it's actually is oversaturated. So this past one, the color management here, it screws up a lot of stuff sometimes, you know. It's like I'd rather not use it. So let's just keep it around like, let's do like 0.9 and then 0.4 and then 0.4 as well. A little bit more, you know, on the pink side. Let's do a little bit more orange here. Try maybe like 950. You see, like anytime I update this thing, it changes completely the look of the skin, right? So at this point here, you're probably going to start seeing a little bit less of the green stuff. But yeah, it's like it's always like a compromise, you know. It's like you have to go back and forth with those things. Now there's basically the color of the skin itself, which was very desaturated. So if I start cranking a little bit more here, and maybe like more towards orange here. At some point, you start like by playing with the color, the radius, and the scale, you start eliminating some of that stuff, you know. It's always like that thing about like finding the sweet spot. Sometimes it gets like too milky, you know, and then it looks weird, you know. It's like you start getting some green tones and stuff like that. One thing you can always do is to actually go to this presets tab in here under your shader, and you have a bunch of stuff that's already built for you, and they have skin in there, you know. And for example, they give you an option to replace what you have in here by 100% or by, you know, just increments. So you can actually try to do that. It's kind of smart the way it does. And it starts with this skin shader that's suggested in here. But in my experience, I don't like the look of it, you know, kind of like I'd rather just do manually. But just by doing those tweaks, you can see that the green kind of went away for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so yeah, it's always a combination, man. It's like finding that sweet spot where like the amount is gathered, especially, you know, it's like in relation to everything else. But just like that glowy thing is kind of gone now as well in here. So yeah.
All right. Oh, thank you so much.
No problem. All right, guys, have fun. Do some work in there. I'm gonna try to do the same in here. And stay safe, you know, it's like, and keep reading and get informed because the information changes all the time and we don't know what's going on, but better safe than sorry, I guess, right? So
Thank you, Chris.
right, cheers, guys.
Bye.
Sure, yeah, take care.
Bye.
All right.
Thanks, Chris. Have a good one.
You too. Let's see.